When I was working for a company as a junior chief editor, I had to work late and volunteer for late night shifts. The staff was broken up into teams of 6, and we had to take turns working the late night shifts in the office. Since we were in a group of 6, we weren't afraid to be in the office at night. We used to have light music switched on while we worked our shifts at night. We also used to bring our food from the house, as ordering online was a waste of money for some of us. Thus, one night, as we were doing our late night shifts at the office, one of us brought a tape recorder that plays only cassettes. We were impressed that our colleague still had that old tape recorder with her, and she told us that it was her late grandfather's. So, we wanted to try the old tape recorder out, so she inserted a cassette into the recorder and pressed the play button. She told us that that particular cassette has mostly old Shah Rukh Khan songs from the film Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So, most of us knew the playlist from that film, and we started enjoying the track list as soon as it started. The songs were playing fine till the end of the track list, and then it repeated. We did not mind listening to the same songs again, as we filled the cold void around the office. Everyone knew the cold and chill air around us that night, and in fact, we would feel it every other night too in the office. Sometimes we would hear plates and cups clattering in the pantry, as if someone was in there making themselves a drink or food, when all of us would be at our tables doing our work at night in that office. Some even reported seeing a shadow coming from the lift, but no one came out of it, and made the lift door open for a very long time. So, as the songs were playing from that old tape recorder, most of us knew the tracklist order. So, we knew what song came next after a song from that cassette. When the song Kuch Kuch Hota Hai ended, we knew that the next song was Sajanjigar Iye, but a different song came, totally unrelated to the movie or the language. We looked at each other in shock and quickly asked the staff who brought the recorder to the office if she had saved more than one movie song in that cassette. She denied that she saved songs from any other movie other than Kuch Kuch Hota Hai movie. That staff tried to replay and rewind the cassette to play in order, but that different song played instead. Finally, she took the cassette out of the recorder and told us to just play our usual music from our computer. As we were searching for the usual music from our computer, we suddenly heard soft music coming from the pantry. It was the same music we heard from the tape recorder just a while ago. We knew it was time to leave the office immediately, so we quickly checked out from the office. The staff who brought the tape recorder was too afraid to even take the recorder back with her, that she left it in the office that night. The next day, when we came back to the office in the morning, we noticed that the cassette from the tape recorder was broken and the cassette film was out of the cassette itself. Till now, the tape recorder is heard to be playing that same music again and again in the office at night. The music is none other than Japanese samurai music. Hello everyone, my name is Megan, I'm 35 years old and I grew up in Kentucky. Starting when I was about 5, my parents bought a funeral home. It was well over 100 years old when they bought it. They owned and ran the funeral home and was a pretty large funeral home in my area. We lived in the upstairs area of the place. They still own and operate the funeral home to this day, and I visit pretty regularly, and occasionally have experiences. I had a very interesting childhood growing up. As a child, I had many experiences every day all the way up until I moved out at 19. Some were terrifying and some were comforting. We had many resident spirits that just stayed around. Some were human, some definitely weren't. Each had its own personality and temperament, and would still have experiences to this day when I go visit my parents. The first experience I remember was when I was about 6 years old. I was sitting on the couch in one of the viewing rooms and I got the feeling of being watched. I looked up, and saw a woman standing in the corner of the room. She was a young woman in her mid-20s. She was wearing a black dress, was very pale, and she had a long red hair. She smiled and waved at me, then said, "Hello little girl," so I said hello back, and she smiled again before disappearing. She would become known as Alice. She's the most extroverted and nicest of the resident spirits in the funeral home. She was very talkative. I formed a very good relationship with her. She pretty much became like a second mother to me. She was the matriarch spirit in the funeral home. A summary of my experiences with her was that I would see her almost every day standing in corners or in the middle of a room. She was always smiling and she always says hello. When I would get off the bus from school, she would always be standing there by the door when I would walk in to greet me. She would smile and say hello, then she would ask how my day was. I would then greet her back and tell her about my day, which she then would disappear. One time in high school, I snuck out to go to a party, and she appeared to my mother in her bedroom and told on me. I returned home to my mother waiting for me at the kitchen upstairs. She protected me from one of the darker non-human spirits that hang out in the embalming room. The first time I wandered into the embalming room right after we moved in, I saw a spirit that definitely didn't seem human. It looked like a young girl that was wearing a gray t-shirt and black pants. Its skin was like scales, like those from reptiles. It had a forked tongue like a snake and red eyes. While exploring our new home, I suddenly heard a loud growl from above me, and so I looked up, and saw it just standing there staring at me. I was paralyzed with fear, when Alice suddenly appeared. It looked at her and kinda leaned its head to the side like a dog that's curious about something. She told it to leave me alone, but it just growled at her and took a step towards me like it was provoking her. Alice then stood in front of me, and this reptilian thing suddenly looked absolutely terrified. What followed was Alice stretching her arm out towards it, and this thing slowly started to levitate and was choking as it flailed about. It looked like a scene of Darth Vader choking someone using the Force. Alice then whipped her arm to the side and the reptile slammed to the wall as it disappeared. After that, Alice turned around, got on her knees in front of me, and told me to be more careful next time before she also disappeared. I don't know if Alice was once a human, but I'm not sure. You guys can tell me what you think since she is seemingly very powerful. And to give a summary of my experiences with the reptilian spirit. As I've said earlier, my first experience with it was Alice protecting me. One experience was when I saw it in one of the hallways, and it climbed up the wall onto the ceiling and just stared at me, before disappearing with a growl. I would see it every time I walked in or past the embalming room. It would just stand there and stare at me, but it never tried to attack me ever since the incident with Alice. She probably scared it to death on how she easily subdued it. Now to talk about the spirit that we called the Gray Man. We would see him in the chapel. He was tall and was wearing a gray suit with a black tie. Most of the time, he just stood there inside and would sometimes wave. He was an older man. He never really bothered anybody, he typically just kept to himself. Though he was quite protective over the organ in the chapel, maybe that's what he was attached to. Then there was this spirit of a little girl that hung out in the living room. She wore a pink dress and had long blonde hair. Most of the time, you would first hear laughing before she suddenly appears in front of you, and when you notice her, she would then run away and disappear. Another spirit was something we called General. He was a young man that wore what looked like a military uniform from possibly the Civil War. He never really said anything to us, but he was always polite and would tip his hat when we would see him. Lastly was the spirits of an elderly couple that we would sometimes see standing together, both dressed in Victorian-style clothes.